Welcome to the Laverne Church of the Brethren's weekly audio message. Here at the Laverne Church of the Brethren, we create a Christian community called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in our congregation. We believe in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people, nations, and faith traditions. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ. We strive to follow the way of Jesus. And through these efforts, we seek to grow ever closer to the mind and heart of God. And now let us ground ourselves as we enter into today's message.
I invite you all to join me in a guided visualization. You are welcome to keep your eyes open or softly gaze down in front of you. And if you are comfortable doing so, join me with eyes gently closed. Bring awareness to your breath, your rib cage, feeling comfortably with each inhale, and gradually, effortlessly, releasing the exhale. The breath continues to flow. Now visualize a light starting somewhere in your chest. Perhaps it is your heart or your lungs or just in there. Maybe the light starts small, or perhaps it's already blazing vibrantly. That light continues to shine. Not that it necessarily grows bigger, but it gains strength. It is nurtured with the continued breath and beating of your heart. The light brings an awareness, an interoception, an awakening, a healing to all of the areas of your body it shines. If it has not already done so, let it start to move. Shining and nurturing the heart, the lungs, the ribs, the muscles between the ribs, at the base, the beautiful diaphragm, the vessels that run through it, shining in the abdomen, throughout the intestines, into the pelvis, slowly lingering and making its way down the legs, into the joints, the feet, the soles of your feet, lingering at the intricacy of the muscles and bones there. It continues up, back up the vessels, the arteries, the veins, and the nerves that make up the back of the leg, heading towards the spine, the strong spinal column, feeling that light, vibrant, all throughout the back of your body, along the spinal cord, the spine, up towards the back of the head, lingering at the base of the skull, making its way up towards the crown and the front of the face, shining on the eyes, the nose, the mouth, ears, throat, and making its way back towards the chest. This glimmering light brings an ease, a beingness, an expansion perhaps. This light, it now continues to hover in whatever areas are still needed for you personally. Perhaps it's lingering at the skull, or deep in the lungs, in the back of the calves, or spiraling in the abdomen. Wherever the light is needed, this glimmer pauses and then continues to move. Take another moment with your light, full of gratitude for it, for your body, your being, your healing, for your ease, your efforts, your impact. This light will be with us a moment longer. And now it's time for the light to move on. However it feels right for you, this shining bright light finds its exit from your system. Perhaps it glimmers shining around your person for a moment or so, blazing brightly. And now, this light flies off, soaring like a bird. It's off to the next person to shine healing light throughout the community, the earth, the world, traveling and lingering to where it is needed all around us. If you felt an impact from this, may you remember that this light is always able to return to you. With this, we can gently lift our gaze, keeping our breath flowing, staying in this present moment, grounded in hope. We are here. Mark 5:25 through 34. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from a flow of blood for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his cloak, I will be made well." Immediately, her flow of blood stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about and in the crowd and said, "Who has touched my cloak?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who has touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease."
The story you just heard from the Gospel of Mark is a story within a story. Sandwiched between the healing of this bleeding woman is a story about a child who is ill. These two stories begin while Jesus was with a crowd. A man named Jairus approached him, fell at his feet, and begged him to heal his dying daughter. As a leader of the synagogue, Jairus was wealthy and an important man in society, a person of privilege, one might say. Jesus agreed and began to walk with Jairus toward his very ill daughter. A large crowd followed, all surrounding Jesus, pressed in and walking toward the home of Jairus. Then an interruption ensued. In that crowd was a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. For 12 years, she sought help from physicians. For over a decade, she spent all the money she possessed in search of healing. Nothing worked. Unlike Jairus, this unnamed woman did not hold privilege or power in society. As a bleeding woman, she was deemed as unclean by Jewish law. This brought social and religious isolation. It was unlikely for her to marry, for she could not touch anyone without causing them too to be unclean. And if she had been married before her condition began, her bleeding was grounds for a divorce. Poor and isolated, this woman held fast to hope as she gathered the gumption to reach toward Jesus for help. She took matters into her own hands, both literally and metaphorically. She joined the crowd following this mysterious Jewish rabbi, this man that she had heard much about. She got close enough to grasp his cloak just for a moment, and in that instant she was healed. Her bleeding ceased. Aware of this touch, Jesus stopped in his tracks. He asked, "Who touched my cloak?" And per usual, the disciples questioned him. "What do you mean? There are a lot of people pressing in on you in this crowd. Why and how could you possibly ask who touched you?" After a moment of silence, the trembling woman came forward and confessed that she was the one who touched the cloak, that she was the one who was healed. Jesus proved her fear unnecessary as he gently replied, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." In the midst of this sacred moment, as Jesus is still speaking, a group approached and told Jesus not to even bother with Jairus' daughter after all. The original healing he had set out to do was now moot point. "She's died," they tell him. Despite this news, he continued to their home, where many wept and mourned the perceived loss of this little girl. Jesus told the mourners that they had it wrong, that this child was only sleeping. And laughter arose from the absurdity of Jesus' statement. They truly thought that she had passed. So Jesus took the hand of this little girl and told her to get up. And she did. The story ends with a directive from Jesus to get this child something to eat. Healing stories can be a bit problematic for me. I've witnessed miracles, times when healing came in ways we could only call miraculous. But I've also experienced times when healing didn't come, or when it appeared in ways I had not imagined. Prayers for relational healing have ended in broken relationships and hopes of physical restoration that have resulted in loss. In the midst of these complexities in our text, I'm drawn to the essence of hope, especially as it relates to our collective societal healing. On the one hand, we encounter Jairus' friends and family who abandon hope in an instant. "Don't bother," they say, when in reality, the girl was quite alive. This reminds me of times in our society when we begin to believe that it's too late to make a difference, as if there's nothing we can do to change things. On the other hand, we encounter a woman who struggles with disease, her hope enduring through years of desperation. I wonder during those 12 years if people or places or experiences offered her glimmers of hope amid her circumstances. I wonder if anyone in her community practiced religious disobedience by breaking Jewish law to be with her and offer support. Did she catch glimpses of birds flying free and imagine herself free as a bird? Maybe she walked by a blooming flower or heard a child giggle, and these seemingly ordinary things brought hope that she could hold on to. This woman's hope reminds me of activists who, despite current challenges, steadfastly cling to hope and persist in their efforts. Recently, Zandra Wagner recommended the book Emergent Strategies to me. In this book, activist and author Adrienne Marie Brown writes about fractals. It's a funny word, but essentially a fractal is a never-ending geometric pattern. These are patterns repeated over and over. In nature, we see them all around, in broccoli, in the ways trees branch out, in the makeup of snowflakes. Their small parts, repeated, make up the whole. I think these fractals act as glimmers of hope, reminding us, as Brown writes, how we are at the small scale is how we are at the large scale. What we practice at the small scale sets the patterns for the whole system. For Brown, it shows up in the way she leads her life. In the small scale of her individual life, she shows up in practices of collaboration, in choosing rest, in organizing efforts based in love and not hate. Brown invites us to practice the world we wish to see in our own small spheres of life. It makes me think, if I wish to see peace and justice in my community, then I must practice peace and justice in my everyday life, even in the smallest of ways. If I wish to see compassion, then I must cultivate compassion in my relationships, in the ways I engage with my children, in the ways I engage with strangers, both in public and in private. And there are already fractal patterns in our midst. I see these patterns, these glimmers of hope all around. I see a glimmer of hope when one of my kids notices an injustice in our home and they call for repair. I see it when I walk past the community garden here and folks are caring for the environment by adding food scraps to the compost pile. I see glimmers of hope in the eyes of a loved one with cognitive changes as we sit together in the presence of divine love. I see hope when communities gather to find ways to protect migrants from detention. This morning, my invitation for myself and for us, I think it's twofold. To notice hope where it already is present, and to practice patterns of hope. Like the woman who reached for Jesus' hem, and like Jairus who called for divine interventions, we are invited to both see and practice hope by choosing to respond and move toward what seems impossible. Perhaps hope isn't something we wait or wish for. Perhaps it's something we practice, even in small ways, through advocacy and rest, compassion and care, through the ways we love one another and listen to each other. Like fractals, these small acts of hope repeat and they grow, shaping a world to be, over time, a world of healing, justice, and peace. Amen. We're so glad that you listened to the message today. If you're looking for an open and affirming, peace-loving, and justice-seeking congregation, consider visiting us for in-person worship on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. We'd love to meet you.